Good evening. It's 7:01, and I want to welcome you to the meeting of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force. My name is Paul Bohm, and I'm the chair of the task force. That's a lot of words. I'm just going to call it the task force. On behalf of the task force, I want to welcome you, all of you, to this forum. I want to thank you for taking time out from a very busy schedule. There are a lot of meetings going on this week, and thank you for attending in person and on Zoom today. I want to emphasize that while we will discuss task force mission and how we intend to accomplish the goals set out by the select board, we hope this will be a discussion, not a lecture. We'll leave plenty of time for discussion. Go back. So please jot down your comments and questions as we go along. We intend to leave plenty of time. If you're on Zoom, please use the raise hand function and we'll recognize you during the discussion session that will follow. Almost all the task force members are here today and they're sitting at the table with me. Their names are out in front. They represent a range of expertise and experience, which is so important to our work. Pam Hill, a key member of the task force, could not be with us this evening. I want to acknowledge task force members. Also want to acknowledge the support we're getting from Chris Carmody and Megan Zamuto, our Intrepid Town supporters who've been with us since we started working in May. I also want to welcome several other key people here with us today. Mina Markarius, Town Council. In the back, Karen Nierenberg, EPA's project manager at the NMI site, and Bruce Thompson of DeMaximus. In the back corner, DeMaximus is a contractor actually leading a group of consultants conducting the cleanup work. I also see several select board members here today. I won't embarrass them by pointing to them, but they are here. So this topic in this particular 46-acre property is of great interest to me for a few reasons. First, I and my wife have lived in town for 47 years in Thoreau Hills. That's a neighborhood right next to the site. So we and my two daughters and 5 of my grandchildren still live in Thoreau Hills, and we often frequent the town trail adjacent to the site in Powder Mill Woods. Second, I've been on a number of town committees which have been working on issues related to the site since the 2000s, and I've seen dramatic changes in the site over these years. And third, my profession is environmental consulting, projects at sea and on land, and a great deal of my professional work has involved chemical pollution, impacts from major oil spills, and the remediation of that pollution. Also on land, my work has included many Superfund sites throughout the US. I find Superfund sites interesting and important. They always involve a lot of science, technology, law, economics, and especially public involvement. And they always involve time travel. When you work on Superfund matters, you not only have to look back and reconstruct what happened in the past, but you also have to project into the future and have a vision for the future. And I think the future of the NMI, of the 2229 Main Street site is really important because looking forward, the responsible parties who created the problem and contaminated the property have moral and legal responsibility for rehabilitating and restoring the land that has been spoiled in the past. But also we, as citizens of Concord, have an opportunity, actually an obligation, I think, to ensure that the land is put into productive use in the future. Regardless of who the future owner of the site is, we need to see this land be productive. The cleanup is well underway, and EPA held a public meeting here in this room on October 25th to brief you on the progress of the cleanup. We'll only spend a very brief time at this meeting on the cleanup of the site, just an overview. And tonight we'll mainly focus on the opportunities side depicted in the slide. By the way, the slides from the EPA meeting are, you can find them on our task force website, and later on we'll give you the website credentials. So this is the challenge before us, as you see in this picture, and before the task force introducing itself tonight. Can we see the problem of a contaminated site in our community that's undergoing cleanup and envision it and grab a hold of it as an opportunity? And if we see it as an opportunity, is that an opportunity for the town of Concord, or should we leave it to other parties as potential owners to realize that opportunity. So with that introduction, let me provide the agenda for tonight. I'll spend a little time talking about the site to give a brief overview for those that are new to the site. Importantly, the select board has provided a charge for the task force, and we're going to talk about what the select board has asked us to do. Importantly, we're going to talk about how we're organized to accomplish those tasks, so you understand how we plan to work, and you can provide input and advice into how we're going to work. How we will accomplish those tasks, we're going to talk about, but public input here is very important. This is a public forum, probably the first of several, and it's important to us to understand what the community is concerned with, what the questions are, what suggestions you have, and what advice you have for the task force. I want to emphasize that that's an important part of this meeting. So the site itself, as you can see, this is the southwest corner of Concord, where the Acton Town Line comes in. You see Main Street, you see Knox Trail, you see the Thoreau Club, you see Black Birch, you see the other housing developments, and you see Thoreau Hills. So the site is located right in the space, right in the center here. And just to give you a little bit of additional perspective, whoops, go back one. Those three circles indicate where I live and where my two daughters live. So we're close to the site. So we've been watching it for quite some time. This is another depiction of the location. And this one is a little bit different, and it shows that this is a heavily populated area. It's right in the middle of neighborhoods, but it's also a heavily wooded area. There are town trails. A good part of the site itself is wooded, and a good part of the site itself has never been used or contaminated. So the site is adjacent to housing and active and passive recreation areas. And this, I like this oblique view from a drone view of the site, and you see in the foreground a wooded area. This is the bog. This is a very important area to be conserved. And in the far side, you see the site as it existed several years ago. The buildings are gone. There's been much more progress since here, but you can get a perspective on what the site looks like overall. I want to say a little bit about, and less than half of this site, as I said before, was used for manufacturing or waste disposal. And there are areas that were never used and were never contaminated. There's one particular area that is of interest to a lot of ecologists, and I know of interest to the Natural Resource Commission, and that's this unique ecological habitat called the sphagnum bog. Sphagnum bogs are formed from old glacial kettle holes, which have been filled in. And there's one other bog in town. It's over near Ripley School. It's called the Thoreau Bog. Its formal name was Gowing Swamp, but Thoreau spoke a lot about one of his favorite places in town. This is a unique habitat. It's about 4 acres surrounded by wooded area that has been largely unspoiled and will remain as an opportunity to enjoy in the future. So not all of the site is a manufacturing site. There's some interesting ecological features. So let me just briefly give you an overview of the history of the site before I get into the mission of the task force. Between 1958 and 2011, the site was operated. It was operated as Nuclear Metals. The employees bought the site and changed it to StarMet. So that's why it's called the NMI StarMet site. And the site was operated during that period, manufacturing depleted uranium armaments for the Army, and doing other research for the Department of Energy and others on specialty metals during that period. I just want to emphasize that between 1980, when Mass DEP first discovered that there was some volatile organics in the groundwater, and to the present, there have been extensive and ongoing investigations. The site was not waiting to be designated as a Superfund site to start cleanup activities. And there have been many cleanup activities and removal actions, first overseen by Mass DEP and later by EPA. The site was designated in 2001 as a Superfund site, a federal Superfund site, under a law that was passed in 1980. And just perspective, There are over 1,300 Superfund sites in the nationwide, and 31 or 32, Kara, it's either 31 or 32 in Massachusetts. So we are not alone, and our community is not alone in understanding and dealing with these sites. Many are undergoing active cleanup. Some have been developed and redeveloped for municipal use. And the task force is learning from those municipalities just what their experiences were in making decisions. Between 2001 and 2011, there were additional cleanup actions. And the 2011 date is important because that was the date that StarMet actually left the site. There was an operating site until 2011, so that really restrained what could be done. The buildings couldn't come down until that period, but right after 2011, activities were really picked up. There were intensive investigations under the Superfund law called the remedial investigations. Those were completed in 2014. They couldn't really start in earnest till the site was abandoned. And that resulted in a record of decision. This is EPA's analysis of the contamination and the determination of what needs to be cleaned up and to what extent. And by virtue of a lot of town input and other input, EPA decided to clean this site up to what's called residential standards. We'll talk a little bit more about what residential standards are a little bit later, but I think you should view those as the strictest cleanup standards, the lowest level of contamination, the lowest risk, and the site would be suitable for any use under those standards. So we can come back to that later. And about the same time, there was a town warrant put before the town, and this warrant was passed in 2015. There are a lot of words here, but the town authorized the select board to acquire the site when it was cleaned up to a residential standard, and provided that the acquisition was voted on by the select board, and the select board would hold a public hearing on the specific terms. So since 2015, the issue has been pending before the select board. What should we do with the site? Should we acquire it? So that's an important perspective. And just completing the brief history, in 2019, a very important document was signed. This is called the consent decree. This is a legally binding document that was entered by Department of Justice with the courts. This secured funding and legally bound the responsible and settling parties to meet those low levels and to set up a trust fund and to fund the cleanup. So the responsible parties were locked in at that point in 2019. In 2021, a report was issued by a town committee on reuse options. Select board asked us to take a look, asked a different committee to take a look at the possible reuse options, a wide range of options. And fast forward to May 2023, when this 9-member task force that's in front of you today, minus Pam Hill, began its work. One important factor, and I think it's an eye popper, is that at the end of cleanup, there'll be more than $250 million spent on the site. It'll be significantly more than $250 million. And that's because the cleanup is complex, it's thorough. There have been issues discovered during the investigations, new issues that had to be dealt with. And I think just virtue of the investment that the responsible parties and the taxpayers have made to the site, this is why it's imperative that we see this site as a productive use in the future. So who are these responsible parties? I think it's important that you realize that 98% of the costs are being borne by the settling federal agencies, the Department of Army and Department of Energy. They funded the research, they funded the work done at the site. So 98% of the cost is coming from the government, coming from taxpayers. And the two responsible parties, the two private entities, Textron and Whitaker, are responsible for 2% of the costs. And I just listed all the various parts of the multi-phase cleanup just to show you how complex and how multifaceted the cleanup is. It involves demolition of buildings, and those have been completed. several years ago. Soil's being excavated and will probably be more than 85,000 cubic yards, and it'll be replaced by clean soil. There's on-site and off-site groundwater treatment, isolation of the waste in a holding basin. So a very complex remediation, which I'm not going to say a lot more about here. There's a lot more detail on the website. And we can talk about, if you have some questions, a little later on that. The cleanup work is scheduled to be completed and ready for reuse by 2028. There's cleanup activities going on between now and then. We'll get back to some issues on the timing a little bit later, but that's an important time to keep in mind. But what's really important is that even after 2028, EPA's and the responsible parties' obligations do not end with the cleanup. They are required to monitor the site, to monitor that the cleanup is working, to take samples, and to keep monitoring into the future, and to report every 5 years on that. And if they discover anything new, to address it, to come back to the responsible parties for additional funding. So even when the site is being reused, it's being monitored by EPA and the responsible parties. Some brief history, very brief on the citizen involvement in the site. Citizens have had their eyes on this site since the 1980s. The first group was CREW, Citizens Research and Environmental Watch, a group of very dedicated citizens that kind of flagged issues at the site. The town committee, the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee, started in 2003. Now, the name looks familiar to the committee and the task force, but that oversight committee is really providing technical oversight to the cleanup, looking at plans, looking at data. It was really a technical committee. In 2019, another committee, the NMI StarMet Reuse Planning Committee, was formed. It was a short-lived committee. We produced a report in 2021, which I alluded to before, which talked about the possible uses of the site if it were to be acquired. And then here we are just starting our work, and for the past 5 months, our task force. So this is the history of town citizen involvement. And just, I'm not going to go into detail here, but there's a lot of rich information on the NMI StarMet reuse site. The group analyzed the site, divided in different areas for possible reuses, and suggested a number of potential reuses, following a number of principles that you'll see here: environmental stewardship, fiscal responsibility, et cetera. Our task force, with outside help, is drilling now into those specific uses, what can be done in different areas. So now I get to the task force and its work, and I'll just introduce that. These are the task force members here in a recent Zoom call. There are a lot of words here, but I do want you to understand what the select board has asked us to do. This is verbatim from the select board charge, and I'll read this very briefly. The purpose of the task force is to recommend to the select board whether the town should acquire the property at 2229 Main Street. Would this be a sensible business decision? And if so, how and when, under what conditions should the town acquire it? The charge alluded to the warrant article that the 2015 town meeting authorized this acquisition if and when the select board votes to do so. Importantly, in making this decision, the task force, that's us, and the select board will need to consider potential uses for the site, potential risk, potential liability, timing, costs, management issues called institutional controls, liens, and other legal matters. It's a full-throated charge that actually went on for 3 pages. And the job of the task force is to thoroughly research these matters, to seek public input, and then make recommendations to the select board. So we're going to go into a little detail how we're going to be doing that at this meeting. Our report is due October 31st, 2024. Let me just say really quickly, this 2024 date, how does that compare to the 2028 date when cleanup will be completed? The reason why that decision date is important is because the time when and if the select board decides to acquire the site, that just starts a process. On that date, the town doesn't acquire the site. It starts negotiations to acquire the site. It also starts planning and capital planning. If there's something to be done in 2028, there's a planning sequence that has to occur during that period. And importantly, if that decision is made, the town has a chance to influence the cleanup. If you're out there now, you see dirt's being moved around, the site's being graded. If the town can tell EPA what we may be doing in certain sites, they can prepare the site for those uses, to include those costs in their charge to kind of restore the site. So there's lots of reasons to making decision before 2028. 2028 is a date when actual shovels development can't start, but there's a whole planning period. That's the point here. We are being assisted by a number of resources that are depicted in this multicolored diagram. Starting in the upper right, EPA has given us a contractor called SKIO, as they're specifically a redevelopment contractor. They helped us during the reuse report. They are assisting us. Town council is assisting us on legal matters. The 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee, the technical committee, is assisting us as well. The town applied for and received a technical assistance grant called the TAG grant for the Mass DEP. That enabled the town to hire an outside consultant, Rue Associates, some of their representatives are here, to help the task force on risk and safety matters. And of course, we're interfacing with the cleanup contractors as well. I should say the select board generously recently provided additional funding for both town council and the risk consultant to support their work for this decision-making process. And last but not least, I mentioned before, there are examples from other towns, and we are going to benefit from conversations with other towns and their experiences. So that chart just shows how kind of complex this task is. I just want to emphasize that public consultation is a really key component of our work. We're committed to this robust program of consultation. This will not be the last forum we'll have. And we're also consulting with town departments and committees and other outreaches being planned. We are definitely not doing this in a vacuum. And the last thing I'll mention to introduce the others is just the 4 work streams. So given the charge of from the select board, there are really 4 different paths. One is the legal path. We have to determine that the town can acquire the site with legal stipulations that are advantageous to the town and can protect the town from future liability. And that's really a key linchpin to the other pieces. We have to look at reuse, but we have to look at the sites that you saw, the various parts of the site, and determine what the residual risks may be, if any, after the cleanup is completed. And are those various areas safe for reuse? And if those areas are safe, then what reuse options and concepts are appropriate for those? And last but not least, if the town is to acquire the site, what are the economics of that ownership? What are the commitments of the town financially? What are they required to do in managing the site? And financially, what it's going to cost them? How is that handled? So we're looking at these 4 areas. And so I'll just say that the process that we're moving into the beginning of next year is we're still in the research mode. All these pieces are going to be coming together. They're depending on one another, and we want to hit our target of report and recommendations by Halloween of next year. And it's an interesting date. So with that introduction to work streams, we want to talk a bit about each of the work streams. And I'll pass this off to Court Booth to start.
Thank you. I'll try not to repeat anything that Paul said. We are looking at the best path forward for the town, be it acquisition or not acquisition. We have more questions and few answers right now, and we're going to have more questions by the end of tonight. That's certainly our hope, thanks to all the public participation we need. You'll note up here that Pam, thankfully, our good fortune, is a former EPA attorney. However, she is not the task force attorney by any means. We are really indebted to the town for bringing ARPA funds our way so that we have town council behind us and we have that independent expertise. And I'll say now we've been consistently impressed with the depth of knowledge that Anderson and Krieger already has in this entire area. We think we're very well equipped with town council working with us. What do we want to accomplish? Well, quite simply, we want to bring an answer to the select board in the form of a recommendation as to whether acquisition makes sense or not, and if so, why, and if not, why not, and if not, what are the mechanisms by which the town can still exercise the controls that it would like to in order to protect town interests. We really couldn't say at this point whether the EPA is going to divest this property toward the town or not. That's a year out, and then it goes to select board, and then it goes to town meetings. So certainly much to be done. So what are we looking at? Acquisition methods is a big one because there's more than one way to acquire this. And in fact, for risk mitigation, we are likely to look at multiple layered ways of acquisition so that we can build in multiple protections on that acquisition path, if indeed that's what the town chooses to move toward. We will have to determine what the value of this property is. We have to determine what the liens are. Is the title clean? There have been recent title searches, but we've got to do our own. Paul already mentioned institutional controls. This idea of land use limitations and restrictions, regardless of who is on that property. Those restrictions have to be in place, have to be enforced, have to be monitored, and the town will never divest itself of its responsibility to know what's happening in terms of that monitoring. We will be looking at insurance provisions and potentials and what could be brought to bear by way of pollution insurance protection, for example. Reuse rights, who can do what, who can't do what is a question we intend to answer. And of course, because there is not a bias on the part of this committee toward acquisition or not, although we do know we want as much control as we can over the ultimate outcome in terms of town risk and town safety, we have to look very carefully at options other than town acquisition. I think it's safe to say, however, the EPA is not eager to keep the property forever. So what questions are we going to look at? Liens, once again, the multiple acquisition methods and how they might be combined for maximum protection. And what then are the liabilities that we feel more comfortable with and which ones still bear watching? That's going to be central to our work. And the protections, institutional controls, and others, again, is going to require monitoring far longer than you or I are going to be around, such as the nature of the site. But we have to be comfortable those are in place to the satisfaction of the town. We are going to rely very heavily on town council. We're going to look at other towns that have sought to acquire or chosen not to acquire and look at their rubrics, their decision-making mechanisms, and bring to the other three work streams, because we're working in close concert with the other three, of course, what are the pros and cons of the various opportunities in front of us, the various pathways in front of us. So that's what our work is going to look like. And I think you're going to do questions of conclusion. Am I right?
Why don't you pass this on to Kurt? Because there are two of us. I go first and he goes second on all the slides. So when I've shut up, it's your turn. And then it's your turn to click to the next slide when you're done. Okay, cool. Hi, I'm David Ropeek. A quick little story. In the 1980s, I was the environment reporter for Channel 5 in Boston. When Superfund program started, I covered the Woburn Wells and all of that. And I was living in Concord at the time and became aware of this site and told my bosses about it and scrupulously decided not to cover it because I thought that was a conflict of interest. So here I am, not having had that conflict of interest. Then I went on to the Harvard School of Public Health, where I studied the psychology of risk perception and using that to more effectively communicate to folks about risk. And that leads me to my service on the committee, which is outreach, engagement, learning from you. We have figured out a lot of questions to ask, but we probably haven't figured them all out. So this evening begins a process that I hope to help with of delving into all of those sorts of things, the engagement side of it.
All right, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Kurt Herman. I'm working with David on the safety and human health risk workstream. I'm also a member of the Concord Board of Health, which I joined about a year ago, so I'm volunteering in that capacity. And for my day job, I'm actually an environmental consultant. I have been involved in environmental consulting for about 25 years and have worked on hundreds of sites around the country, including Superfund sites. And as part of my work, I've been involved in developing risk-based remediation approaches. So this seemed to be a good fit for my background.
So what does public engagement mean? Gosh, it's pretty much what you can imagine. We want to provide as many opportunities as we can to gather your concerns, interests, their interests in reuse, their interests in safety, their interest in insurance, there's interest in all sorts of stuff. We want to gather that so that it can be included in our report to the selectmen. The selectmen are going to then have to decide what to do with it, and it's going to go to town meeting, and there's going to be a lot of politics and town politics over this. And we want to have your input helping inform what we pass on to the select board to get that process going so that it's inclusive.
And I guess from my side of things, what two of my main objectives are to help explain the Superfund risk assessment process and how that ties into the remedy that's being implemented at the site. And recognizing that the Superfund human health risk assessment process is very complex, it's technical, and there's a lot of jargon. So just being a resource to help explain that. And then really, I think the primary objective is being able to evaluate and communicate the post-remediation risks, Paul used the term residual risks, that are remaining at the site after the cleanup's done to ensure the protectiveness of the intended site's use.
Hang on, Richard, we're going to do questions at the end, and good to see you. We're not quite there at the end yet, but all our work groups are going to present because we all kind of inform each other, and then we'll get there. Our outreach will not just be waiting for you to talk to us. I've already contacted 40 or 50 people in town on behalf of the task force to invite them to this meeting and for their suggestions and their ideas and whatever. And we'd love your ideas and suggestions tonight, including those who you think we ought to contact. So there'll be that outreach. And we're looking for suggestions and ideas for not just specifically how to reuse the site, but all of what goes into recommending whether the town should acquire and how we control the site. So we'll be reaching out to you and asking you to reach out to us. And there's we'll get to it at the end, but there is now, we've set up an email address. So after this meeting, you'll have it and you can email us and tell your friends.
And in terms of
No spam though.
you know, not to spend a lot of time on these questions related to the human health risk assessment side of things, but really focused on trying to get at the protectiveness, residual risk associated after the remedy is complete, and what controls are needed just to maintain that protectiveness beyond the institutional controls that are required by the consent decree.
There are a lot of questions to a site like this because the word risk is a slippery word. It can be a trigger word. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And one of my jobs with the group is to help make sure that the public's concerns about that field of things is adequately understood, explained to the extent that we and the experts who are helping us can explain it. So we'll be reaching out to individuals, be looking for speaking opportunities. We'll be speaking at public meetings or holding more of these public meetings. And as I said, we'll be providing contact information to us. But specifically, there's a public engagement part. That's kind of all of us. And my hope is to contribute on the issues around risk and safety. The technical advice on this committee is unparalleled, And I'm kind of like a translator on that.
In terms of the risk and safety assessment for really how we're going to get the answers to the questions we're raising, really relying on all the work that's been done to date by the contractors and consultants, EPA, Mass DEP, the community groups that have really done an excellent job getting us to the place we are today, where the site's being cleaned up, and we're looking at kind of the end goal in 2028. And then the town has also, as Paul mentioned, hired a consultant, Rue Associates, who's in the audience tonight, to perform a post-remediation risk assessment, which will evaluate the residual risk at different areas of the site associated with different uses. And obviously that's heavily contingent on the uses that are being contemplated at the site, which Gary's going to be speaking about.
So the reuse work stream, who are we? I'm Gary, and before serving on this committee, I served with Paul as co-chair on the predecessor committee that issued the report he had already mentioned. I was also on the planning board, and on the planning board, I helped co-chair Concord's most recent long-range plan. And currently I'm serving on the NRC, and that's important because as a liaison to the Natural Resources Commission, I think you're going to see that it's likely that one of the potential recommended uses is going to be some open space conservation. Because as we've mentioned, there's certainly one portion of this parcel which has a unique and undeveloped clean wetland habitat, sort of in the middle of the eastern half of the parcel. So that's something to look at. Rich Feely, the other half of the reuse work stream, he has significant experience. Oh, sorry, did I turn that off? In state government, but he's also president of the Concord Housing Foundation, and he's a member of the Affordable Housing Trust. So together, we make up the reuse work stream, and our goal is to develop a data-driven approach to identify a set of potential uses that are appropriate at the site. And even for, different areas of the site, as, the chart, our little logo there in the upper right-hand corner indicates, the site varies quite a lot. And different areas have different characteristics and different suitability for various uses. But the aspects of appropriateness that we'll be looking at include demand, what do people want, but also what's technically and economically feasible. And so this, question of appropriate harkens back to Paul's introductory slide. I think he framed it as problems and opportunity, but I think about, risks and opportunity. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities here on the site. So whether we decide to acquire the site or not, we want to identify potential uses that present opportunities for the town, regardless of ownership. And we want to also make sure that the risks of allowing various uses, via zoning or other methods in the event that the town decides not to acquire the site. It's worth noting also that our work stream is going to be dependent on the other work streams, as mentioned before by Court. They will be providing us with the health risk assessments, the legal structure for potential acquisition, and revenue models. You'll hear about in a second from Carl, but ensuring that uses are financially sustainable. At the same time, we provide them with uses that inform their work. So what questions are we going to address? Ultimately, the highest and best use for the site is certainly part of our mandate, but any of you fans out there of Concord's long-range plan will remember that a really important municipal decision like this needs to take a systems approach. And we want to consider if there are ways to achieve multiple town goals and needs through smart planning. So we'll be looking not just for one single use, but a complementary set of uses that may be able to address our renewable energy and sustainability goals, while also building critical infrastructure for grid reliability, or enhancing our conservation and passive recreation goals, while also building resilience for flooding, or addressing our acute housing needs, while also considering municipal space needs, or expanding tax base while also providing important amenities like playing fields. So, these are illustrative. Not all of these ideas can or necessarily should be packed into one site, but I think it is likely that, more than one of these ideas is, could be located at the site, regardless again of ownership. So how are we going to get answers? As I mentioned at the outset, we envision a data-driven approach to determine allowed or recommended uses. That means that it's not going to be just Rich and my opinion on, oh, I think this should go here. Rather, we're really looking forward to hearing from you. David has already mentioned that. I think he'll say a lot more about public outreach. We want to hear what people would like to see at the site, but with the assistance of SKIO, the consultant that EPA has provided us, Paul mentioned earlier, we're also looking at a lot of town documents, demographic data to try and identify potential needs. We're reaching out to various developers of different kinds to hear what kind of development is in demand, what kind of development is not for this site specifically. We've been interviewing various town departments to better understand not only how they could use the needs to address some of their department needs, directly, but whether there are town services or functions that could be shifted to the site that would enable freeing up other parcels in town. And then finally, and importantly, we're also reaching out to other towns who have redeveloped Superfund sites, brownfield sites, to understand what choices they made and how that worked out for them. But with that, that's sort of the reuse work stream, and I'll pass off to Carl.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Carl Seidman. I'm working on what we're calling the operations and financial work stream. I'm a economic development consultant, have expertise in planning, real estate, development, finance. I also work with Gary and Paul on the M&I StarMet reuse committee, and also worked on the Envision Concord plan. Carrie Flood, who's working to my right here, who's also working with me on this, has a long history of nonprofit management, also significant service to the town on many boards and committees, including the select board and the finance committee. What do we hope to accomplish? Well, we're really focused on, I think, two key issues. I think one, you've heard this term of institutional controls that have to stay in place over time to protect the cleanup remedy, protect human health. Well, really understanding operationally, what is that going to mean for the town in ensuring those institutional controls are complied with, and are there financial costs associated with that. And then secondly, really understanding the town's obligations and costs associated with reuse and how that might vary if the town has ownership of the site or not. And then lastly, also trying to understand the extent the town will be incurring a lot of new costs. How could it fund and finance those? What are some of the resources or partnerships that might help it do that? So some of the questions we're going to focus on, they really kind of fall into three buckets. One is, as I mentioned, the obligations and operations associated with, ownership of the site. And then, the reuse of the site currently, you probably noticed from the pictures, there's not really infrastructure that will support development at the site. If the site is going to be reused, roads, electric service, water, sewer, or not sewer, septic system, what are those costs going to look like? How might they differ if the town is owning the site or if there's another owner? Even if the town doesn't acquire the site, bringing new activity in the site's can impact town services, and what new costs might be associated with schools or police or fire or other impacts in the town associated with its reuse. And then lastly, what are the financing options? How can the town go about addressing those costs, do it in a responsible way, sustainable way, and draw on other resources, whether it's private sector partnership or the state agencies like mass development that may be able to help contribute to those costs. So how will we get those answers? will come from sort of similar sources that you've already heard about. We do want to look at the experience of other communities that have dealt with Superfund sites and what we can learn from that might be particularly helpful in terms of the issue of institutional controls. We're also hoping to get input and assistance from SKIO and the work that the town council is doing. That's going to influence some of these questions. We're probably going to rely very heavily on town departments. They're going to be best equipped to sort of understand operational impacts, infrastructure, what that might cost the town. We're also going to draw on financial analysis, interaction and research across the full task force, both on funding sources, but also on the implications of all of our work. What comes out of the potential reuse may have a big impact on operations and financial costs. And then lastly, what I've laid out here, what the other work stream members have laid out here are really our initial framing and thinking around this work. We really welcome your thoughts and feedback, and particularly, what are things that we're missing? Are there key issues, key questions that we haven't identified that we need to be thinking about? So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Paul.
Okay, well, thank you all task force members. I just, we're go into the Q&A session here. I just want to conclude with, to remind you that we're in the research mode of our project. We've been working for 5 months. We could go in different directions here, which is this graphic indicates we've made no decisions. The only decision we made is how we're going to do our work. And as several people have said, if we're missing anything, we'd like your input and to make sure we're not leaving any stone unturned. That's sort of our motto. So please ask your questions. If we have answers, we will answer them. If we don't have answers, we'll wait till the next forum till we do have answers. And as David indicated, this is our email address. After this meeting or at any time, please feel free to email us at 2229taskforce@concordmass.gov. We also have our website, which you can find easily on the town website, which has a lot of documents to refer to. And with that, if we can take it off of presentation mode and just see all the gallery, and we invite your questions. If you can come up to the mic or take a mic, or somebody can hand a mic to you. And
That way the Zoomers can hear you.
And if you can just identify yourself and
West Concord resident, Mary Weinberg, Hillside Avenue, less than a mile from the site. I'll have to clock it tomorrow in my car. I have a question. From 1960 to 2011, I mean, who were the customers for Nuclear Metals, Stormet, for their products? When whatever they made, who was the customer? Who were the customers? Do you have all that information? Who were buying the products? They were a business that was there from 1960 to 2011 producing whatever they produced. Who were the customers? Who were their clients?
I don't have a whole list of the customers, and
if we could have a list of that.
well, let me defer to Bruce Thompson, who's probably researched that.
Well, I have a few more questions.
The biggest customer was us,
Who's us?
Department of the Army,
Who?
the government.
Okay, but the thing is, I'd like to, I mean, you asked us, not to know it right now, but I'd like to know, maybe somebody else would like to also too, all the people that were their customers. And then if the US government was one of them, the percentage of all the products that were sold, how much was the US government? How much did they receive?
It's a really good question.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't expect.
I don't know who has the information,
Right, but this, I think
I
this is
acknowledge the question.
important.
We'll try to find
This
the
is
answer.
important. The other thing is that a former member of my extended family, he got his PhD in Princeton on underground streams. And is there a way, since we're spending so much money on this, to get in touch with Princeton University, Lizzie would, and since they have a program for people with doctorates on underground streams. Is there a way to get information from Princeton about underground streams? I remember at the time when I used to ask my cousin's husband, could you tell me about it? And he says, you don't want to know. But I think this is something that I think is important.
Well, the groundwater investigations, underground streams is very important at the site,
Is what?
is very important at the
Right.
site.
And
And
who's
have
doing
been-
it?
There's been a lot of investigation as part of the work that's gone into the cleanup planning. And
Right.
so the hydrogeology is pretty well known
Right.
at the
But
site.
still, since this is so big, I would like personally one person I vote as a taxpayer, another consultant. That's all.
I will defer to the EPA and to the Maximus to consider that, but it's a good suggestion.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for letting me sit down.
Thank you. Richard Foreman, 119 Elsinore Street. It's quite an impressive committee you have, I must say. You're looking forward, that is, you're looking at what are the options, the best practices and so forth for the future. And therefore, presumably, you've all had some really thorough, detailed analytic report on the hazards that were there and are there. And I just wanted to, in other words, the hazards are there, where they are on the site, were or are, and what EPA and the other engineers have done so far for mitigation and what they plan. Is there a report of that you've seen that we would be, that the public or the residents would be able to read or absorb? I'd like to see it.
Let me step in. There's tons, and I've been reading tons of it on your behalf. And the second part of your question is probably the most important part, Richard. Is it legible to regular folks? One of the things that we've been talking about is creating a website for this activity, still a work in progress possibly, which would do some of this translating that I was talking about. So for example, we were in correspondence about some other steps that they're going to be taking, and I was using, if I can, regular speak. But I have read a ton. The town's website for this task force already has links to a lot of the documents that Rue is using and other people are using about what work has been done, what hotspots were contaminated with what, the work that Bruce is in charge of. There are lots of documents out there already, which we'll be using. And to the extent that you need translating, and you don't, but folks do, we will take that as part of our charge. I don't know all the details, but they were for a time, but not exclusively in that time period.
Right. By the time I worked there, it was the vast majority was US government, Department of Defense, Army, et cetera. But there were smaller customer relationships for other products made from the depleted uranium and beryllium products as well.
Yes, Carrie Flood was an employee of StarMed, by the way. She worked in the office. I don't know if you want to add anything to the data inquiry,
I think Gara was going to mention something.
Kara.
Hi, so I'm Kara Nierenberg from EPA. I'm the remedial project manager for the nuclear metal site. I will add a link also onto the task force's webpage, but EPA's, they call it the site profile page, has endless documents about the site. History of the site, investigations that have been done, our design plans for the cleanups. They are all, you can find the information there, and feel free to reach out to us too with any kind of specific technical questions related to it.
I was just going to mention, if you're really looking for one kind of key document that summarizes the investigations, including the hydrogeology and the water underground, it's called the remedial investigation. It's on EPA's website.
It's a really good question because everything we're talking about is driven by the data that have been acquired at the site. And there've been many, many, many samples and a lot of data already taken at the site, and Demaxis continues to take samples and analyze them. There's an on-site laboratory, so there's data even being generated. That data goes into the cleanup decisions. It also goes into the risk work that's being done. So we could advise how to reuse the site, what areas have never been contaminated, what areas have been cleaned up, what areas there might be some residual contamination not to be developed. So all that is tied into data. You want to go to the mic? Just say, let's go to this mic. Let's go to this mic over here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hi, Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace. I am the chair of the Solar Implementation Task Force. Our task force has assigned a liaison member to your group, Charlie Parker. He's in the crowd tonight. And so we hope to build a productive relationship. I would recommend that on the list of reports and town documents that you're referencing, that you look at the Sustainable Concord Climate Action Plan as part of that inventory. It wasn't listed on there, and solar energy and energy production on that site is certainly a fine use for the site. I'll just give a quick précis about how we feel it really works well. Forest Ridge is the location for the substation through which all electric energy flows into the town of Concord. It's less than a mile down the street at 2229 Main Street and up Forest Ridge. The light plant already has significant infrastructure that traverses down Forest Ridge, across Main Street and up into the site, because Nuclear Metals was a significant energy consumer. So there's already good infrastructure between the substation and there. All of the circuits that serve the entire town branch from that Forest Ridge station. And so this is a very central location for either solar energy production or battery storage, which could then serve our entire grid. One thing that would be very helpful is, if we think about solar on the site, is that we think about creating a policy, some sort of policy that says, if you're considering putting up buildings, hardscape, parking lots, anything else, that the policy says that must include solar. That way we get dual use out of the site, even if we're putting up affordable housing, or if we're putting up playing fields with large parking areas, we will find ways to include solar on the site. So even if we're not specifically allocating land for ground mounted solar arrays, we could still find another way to wedge some solar production into that site. So just keeping that in mind, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you for that comment. The interest in the site and the changes over the past two years have been kind of really heartening. I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, this was just a problem. It still is a problem. It's not a problem totally solved. But between solar energy, I know the recreation department, I know that the various housing entities they're putting into their plans. It's potential because the town doesn't own the site yet, but the opportunity potential is being realized by a lot of pieces of the town, the public and the committees, and I appreciate your comments.
Excuse me, Dee, as a outreach guy, can I encourage you and everybody to make sure you signed in on a sign-in sheet so that there's a way to get back in touch with you? Thank you. Thank you. I could find you though.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bob Ellis. I live on Haywood Mill Road, and I'm 69 now, and 62 of my years I've lived on that road. I have survived. So I'm not saying that's medical proof, but probably the disasters of Starman may not be as bad as it seems. My kids have lived there and they seem okay too. But the other thing I haven't heard anybody mention about was that Starman's not the first company on that land. The original company on there was American Cyanamid, Hercules Powder, and everywhere from Swanson Pontiac to Cranberry Lane was all little buildings and railroad tracks, and guys and horses were blown up all the time from all the explosives there. So I don't know if any of that contamination is still there or not, but American Cyanamid put a lot of crap on the ground there for years too, long before StarMed ever got there.
And Powder Mill Woods is named because of the powder mill that was there. And you can still see the railroad tracks on the town trail.
Yeah.
And the remnants of the powder mill. So there's,
Yeah, they pull the wagons of explosive powder with, and once in a while, bad things would happen and horses and men would disappear. But that's true everywhere from Swanson, Pontiac, all the way over to White Pond. That used to be Powder Mill Road, but it was abandoned in the thirties. But I won't say anything more, but ma'am, the answer to your question is that the Army bought a lot of StarMet depleted uranium for projectiles, because those are great projectiles if you want to blow your enemy up, because they're very dense.
thank you, Bob.
Yeah. Did you? You had something earlier.
Hi, my name's Manny Kroback. I live on Thornton Lane, a resident. Looking at the map and given how long this was a site where they had depleted uranium. Following on to the first question, how about seepage of the radioactivity? Is it only confined to that area that you showed the map of, or could it have leached further out? And are you evaluating areas outside of that square footage or acreage?
Okay, with the caveat that we're not discussing remediation detail, I personally know that the investigations have been on-site and off-site. I don't know if anybody from EPA wants to add to that, but the off-site possible transport has been thoroughly investigated.
There are also, just to add to that, wells off-site to capture some of the groundwater that's flowing off-site. Bruce can speak to that more if you want to, but off-site is definitely within the orbit of where stuff could move that the cleanup involves.
Yeah, I'll just say the depleted uranium and isotopically natural uranium in groundwater are confined to the 229 Main Street property. The depleted uranium in soils that we're having to clean up is also confined to the 229 Main Street property. Off-site or off the property, then moving under the river towards Acton is a plume of 1,4-dioxane. It's a different contaminant in groundwater, so it's not radioactive, but there is site-associated groundwater contamination that's gone off the Main Street property. Okay.
Nancy James, 48 Walden Terrace. I was told some time ago that town council said that the property was probably uninsurable. In my 40+ years of professional experience, I would say that would put the town in a very perilous position, that we know nothing about the cost of insurance, the cost of engineering regularly to prove insurability ongoing, or any of those matters, and the expenses. And we absolutely need to know that before we proceed. And I have written a couple of letters to our select board regarding that. And we should not, until we know the risks and we know, then we're going to have to be told that. We have to be transparent here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the comment. It's spot on. This is really what we're doing. We're researching these matters, legal matters and all sorts of matters. We don't have those answers right now, but they're certainly central to what we're looking into.
Hi, Brian Folds, 33 Riverdale Road. I'm on the light board, but not speaking on their behalf. I want to echo Dean's comments about solar and storage on the site. It's the substation is very close and it does not have land around it to put in an acre or two of energy storage, which could really help the town in lowering rates. So this site being so close is a great opportunity. So I just want that to be considered. And then dual use solar. So making sure that that site can facilitate an array, whatever other use it has, but making sure that that land has two uses. So it could be a transportation facility or other such. My own opinion is I would rather the town be the steward of this land because it will understand and follow the guidelines. If I came to the EPA meeting and understood that essentially the first 10 feet of the soil will be new soil from other locations that is safe and so forth. But below that, the contaminants will remain, but there'll be liens on the properties about digging and use. It's great that all the legal paperwork is there and everybody knows the rules. That doesn't mean that, 50 years from now, someone's going to redevelop that property and they're not going to know those details in the lien and they're going to want to build a structure and they're going to do it without a permit. That's my concern. So I'd rather see the town take stewardship of this because they will be responsible with its use and will understand the property's limitations. But that's my thoughts. I think it's number one, energy storage, which will require about an acre or two of that land near the A3 area, because that's where the access is for those types of facilities. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Can I just, as the gentleman on Zoom has been waiting for a bit. Phil Brewer, are you there? I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Phil Brewer, 132 Wright Road in West Concord. Not that we should have any doubt, but it is reassuring to see such a high level of expertise represented by the board and other people commenting. I think it's kind of right in our wheelhouse. I want to echo the comments made by Nancy James.
Feel good to move around.
That we need to make sure this is not just an academic exercise, that whatever conclusions we draw about how this property can be redeveloped and used, that we need to make sure the practical application to protect ourselves, the citizens and voters and taxpayers of Concord, are not potentially hung out to dry by the unintended consequences that we see around us, unfortunately, every day with other, perhaps not directly related, but other remediation efforts within life. We just need to be very careful, and we would assume that if Concord was the steward and the owner of this property, that we would have more direct control, but potentially with more direct consequences if anything goes awry. So I think we need to be extremely careful about how we do this. We don't want this coming back to us with a huge tax problem, whether it's in 5 years, 10 years, or 50 years. So I'm glad this is getting the attention that it needs. And we just need to make sure that it's not just an academic exercise. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the comment. And I think the task force agrees with you. It has to be thorough exercise on all matters. Thank you. I'll take a comment in the room.
Okay, thank you. I'm Chris Reynolds, 15 Captain Miles Lane. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking for myself. So I have a couple of questions. One, is it possible or reasonable to actually buy a part of the parcel? Can you actually divide it up or no?
My understanding is no.
You have to buy it all.
It's all or nothing. I hate to characterize it so simply.
Okay.
As far as we know right now.
Right.
I mean, I think
Okay.
outside counsel is looking into that. We'll discuss it. But as far as I've heard, I know it's the entire
It's all or
site
nothing.
has to be
Okay.
acquired.
Secondly, the 2015 town meeting vote, is it your understanding or town councils that if the select board, let's say in 2024, agrees with the purchase, does it not have to go back to town meeting because of the vote in 2015, or would it?
I'd like to have the town council answer that.
Thank you. Mina Macarius from Anderson Krieger Town Council. The short answer is as long as the conditions in that vote, so that was discussed earlier, are met, that vote remains an available source of authority for the select board to use. However, as a lot has happened on the site since then, if conditions have changed enough, we may need to go back to town meeting if there's that vote. To answer your first question, I think just to slight tweak on that, the town legally could acquire less than the whole site. However, that is a very complicated thing to do with all of the other protections that were mentioned, because the site as a site, from EPA's perspective, has a lot of it that is kind of unitary.
Thank you, Mina. And my last question, so does this committee and does your project include, and you know, I think the biggest issue that we'll face, whether we want to, if your reuse recommendation is to live there, to work there, to visit there, is people's fear of going to the site, right? So is it your job to help reduce that risk and fear within the community? Are you going to provide metrics and have that discussion, or does that happen after your recommendation?
I think our recommendation has to take into account the concerns of the community. Our recommendation is that the select board should move to acquire or not, but the process of public consultation doesn't stop there. What actually happens at the site is subject to discussion even after that decision is made. But it's our job to address risk concerns, safety concerns as best we can.
Yeah, you raised a wonderful question. So there's a lot of details that go into, is it clean, is it not clean? The residential standard is like Cadillac level. It's like you could live there for 70 years and play in the dirt and not raise your cancer risk more than 1 in a million. That's basically the bottom line science. But explaining all that to people who hear words like Superfund and chemicals and radioactivity is a challenge. I covered a lot of brownfields, right? Recovered Superfund sites that over time, people become confident in the explanation of the cleanup. So they don't really need the explanation of parts per million and all that sort of stuff. It's more Pam's group and this group and lots of groups have looked into this, and Rue and our associates have looked into this really super extensively, so that when we don't use the word safe and we don't use the word risk, because that can mean different things to different people. But when we reassure the town that based on our research, it can be used safely or comfortably or whatever word you want to use, that there's a trust that the process has been thorough enough, that addresses the concern as much as detailed explanations of the science. That's been the experience in Waltham and Burlington and places that I'm thinking about. It's trust in the time that's gone into the process, the number of citizens who've had a say in the process, how thorough the process has been, more than anything else that helps people be reassured that reusing the site is okay.
Well, I'll just add that our work and our recommendations need to be based on facts and information, as opposed to have to take into account concerns and emotions. But our recommendations have to be based on real information. And there's a lot of real information out there and to be developed. So it's the best we can answer at this point, but this conversation with the community needs to be an ongoing process.
And it's not as though we won't be providing the information itself. I don't mean to dismiss the importance of that information translated so that it's accessible to people. But, you know, if you don't trust the people who are providing you the information, what's good's the information? It boils down to that confidence in the process too.
There are a couple of hands raised on Zoom. One is Rober. I don't know if that's Robert without a T. If you can identify yourself and pose your question.
Sure. This is Robert Hoagland. I live at 369 Border Road in Thoreau Hills. My question is, you indicated in the beginning that there was a report already done where folks were surveyed about what they would like to see for the uses of the site. which I can tell you that I responded to. And I'm just trying to understand how this committee is going to take that report into account.
So I think some people in the room are having trouble hearing. Robert asked about the reuse report that was already written. And basically, where is that? And wanted a little more context.
So that's the.
Sure. Between, as Paul indicated, between 2019 and 2021, we prepared a committee that developed a reuse report. It actually looked into more than just potential uses, which again, our work stream is looking into potential uses for the site again. It, looked pretty extensively at what was on the site, what were models for acquisition, a lot of the things that we're digging into here. But we looked at it at a relatively 30,000 foot level, I would say. It was a pretty high level report, provided some recommendations to the select board, but it didn't give definitive enough answers, I think, for the select board to feel comfortable taking action at that point. So we've been reconstituted and that's why I think you see some of the expertise you see represented on this board to dig deeper. Our job is to really dig deeper to give the select board confidence that, when they make a recommendation to town meeting, that they feel confident in that recommendation. And you can find it, as Paul indicated, at the website. I don't know if we can put that link back up again, but
if you Google Concord, Mass. 2229 Main Street report, it comes up right away.
There you go.
Yeah, and it's a long report with a lot of appendices, but there's an executive summary, which is easy to read, hopefully, and covers the main issues, but there's a lot of detail in there. Back in the room.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize how, when I asked the question, who were the clients, I think that this is very important. Exactly the details of the customers, which you said mostly was the United States government, but I really would like to know all the specifics. Number one, number two, if it was the United States government, which it was, this opened in 1960. I learned about the danger in 1980 when there were a group of West Concord residents that brought it to the attention. The United States government, and this is what I'm just saying because I want to see this in writing, continue to be a customer, and I would like to see it in writing. Did they continue to be a customer into 2014 with all of these questions around it? If so, I don't know if we're allowed to say what we feel, or is this just questions? If this is so, am I allowed to say what I feel? You're looking at me, you're not, I know this is questions.
Mary, the answer is yes, go.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that is true, then at the point when the Concord residents realized that this was dangerous, the government continued to purchase products from this site. Therefore, my conclusion is that the government is part of this. So I can't really trust, I hate to say this, the government EPA. I again emphasize an outside client, the Princeton Underground Water Specialist, and also this site should be under the United States government forever. And we should be able to Concord put our solar panels, our energy and everything, even if we have to take it up to the Supreme Court. That's
the 2019 consent decree was filed with the court that makes the Department of Army, the Department of Energy, the US government legally bound to take care of the site.
Well, they should own it. We shouldn't pay money to buy it. And I said that I'm never going to feel comfortable since all those years they were using it. How can we trust the people that used it knowing what the byproducts and what was doing? We close it off. We use it for solar panels or energy, and the government owns it. And there'd be a memorial at the end. At the end of last meeting, Stuart Weeks raised his hand and he said, "What is the moral of this?" And there was no answer. My moral is there should be a memorial. This should never have happened, and this will never happen again. And we can be proud that we've closed it off, and it will never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Could I address that one? So you
could
were
identify yourself.
making.
Why don't you identify yourself, Pam?
I'm Pam Rockwell. I live in West Concord and I'm also on the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee. And before it was a Superfund site, I was on the Article 41 committee, which was also a town committee about this site back when it was still NMI and then it became StarMet. When DEP was initially cleaning up this site, they did a risk assessment to make the company clean up the materials that were in the holding basin. And our town voted $25,000 to spend on an engineering firm to review the risk assessment, review the data, review the risk calculations, review the exposure pathways in order to look into that for our town. That wasn't the Army saying it's safe. That was our town consultant saying that the plan looked good to remove the holding basin materials and would contribute to the safety of Concord citizens. In this instance right now, the committee here also has a consultant, Rue, that is reviewing the risk assessment and all the feasibility study data and all of the information that goes into that so that our town can also make a reasonable assessment of the safety independent of the government telling us, oh, don't worry, it's safe. So yes, potentially you have the US government saying another part of the US government has cleaned it up safely, but we have our own people that are reviewing that data and making sure that we're not having a bag pulled over our head.
And in addition, we should give credit to Pam because she, for like 20 years or something, you've been on the oversight committee, volunteers like you and me, who've been giving their time to work to watch that cleanup and make sure that the government is doing their job right.
Yeah, I'll just burn the reason why I had that slide with all the eyes that have been on this from the town, independent of any responsible party or any government agency. We've had a lot of people, including this committee, including Pam's committee, including crew. I've been looking at this for a long time. So with that, online, Catherine Perry, you've been waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Perry, 134 Border Road. I'd like to touch on some of the land use issues. I should probably mention that I'm also a land use planner myself. The main thing I want to draw attention to is the fact that this site is close to the four-way town boundary. And I think there are some significant land use issues in play at the moment. I know that the town of Maynard and the town of Acton are both looking at housing in this vicinity in connection with the MBTA communities, I think. Concord itself, as you know, also has a 40B application, a second one in the area on the Thoreau Club property. There hasn't been a good history of coordination between the four towns. And I know that the 40B development that exists caused some bad feeling with the adjacent towns in terms of the arrangement for the access and so on. There was never any shuttle bus put in place or anything like that to address the total lack of public transport in this area. So, you know, I would just ask for coordination and for recognition that if all of the towns were to develop further dense housing in this location, that there's going to be an even worse traffic problem than there already is. I know traffic problems are widespread, but this isn't a town centre. It's not a great location. There's no public transport, as I say. So I think that just needs to go into the thinking.
Gary.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to point out that we have been taking some of that into consideration, you know, in the town's long-range plan, which has been mentioned a couple of times tonight. You know, responsible regionalism is one of the principles that we look at. And so in identifying complementary uses for the site, one of the things the reuse work stream is looking at is, you know, what are uses that are responsible for our neighbors in Sudbury and Acton and Maynard. And we have looked in the prior committee specifically at nodes on public transit and whether or not a node, you know, given the amount, the density of housing that surrounds this parcel, whether a public transit node might be one of the uses that would work there. So we're exploring those kinds of things. But as we say, very preliminary. All of this is, looking at it, but we definitely are reaching out to folks in Acton, and I think David can speak more to outreach, but we're talking with our towns that surround us.
You should also know that there have been people from Acton participating all along in the, where's the hazardous material going, not the reuse. So that's a really good suggestion. But there is some awareness, at least in Acton, of the, where's the groundwater flowing and that kind of thing. And those people have been participating. So building on that's a great suggestion. Yes, and part of the remediation that's been done already is, Bruce, are there 3 wells, 4 wells already to catch that, for specifically to protect those wells, if I'm not wrong?
No, one well on the Acton side of the river that cut off the plume of groundwater contamination heading toward Assabet 1A. We turned that on in 2017, and just October we're turning on another 2 wells to basically further cut off the flow of groundwater contamination. So that's been on our mind since we basically discovered it and accelerated that part of the cleanup.
And Acton's mine too, but that's not reuse. So good suggestion.
Yeah, and it hasn't escaped us that because of the location, regional thinking for the site is appropriate. We're not there yet, but whatever is done at that site can have a regional business impact, a regional recreational impact, a regional impact of a lot of different sorts. So that thinking is in our plans a little bit down the road. It's a work in progress, as I said before. Jeff Fraser on Zoom. Jeff, your hand is raised.
Sorry, I was on mute. Just want to thank the committee. Got a lot of confidence in the background and what I've been following over time with the committee. I've been in some of the EPA meetings, and I think anybody who has questions about what's going on the site, it's very easy to go online and find exceptional information that's quite easy to digest about how the cleanup is going without a lot of technicality. My one question was just though about some acquisition options. At one point it was eminent domain was mentioned, and then now it's, acquisition. So I just want some clarity about what are the options of acquiring the site. And I also believe seeing some of the other surrounding property being consumed by residential areas, it would be great to see that stay as a green space. But opinion aside, I'd just like to understand maybe what are some of the acquisition options after hearing about eminent domain at one point.
So in addition to eminent domain, there's tax taking that is an option for the town to pursue. Superfund law, which I'm no expert on yet, allows for what do we call it? Covenants not to sue. We could get those in place, we would hope. And the liens have to be resolved, and the EPA's desire to recover some of their investment is something that would have to be negotiated. I don't know if others have more to add.
Thank you, Court.
Some of the options, Jeff.
Appreciate
it. Again, we'd want to see if we could exercise multiple options. There's another one referred to as the bona fide purchaser, prospective purchaser status. And that's a status we would seek with the EPA that would recognize that were we to take the property, we're taking a property that we'd never touched or harmed on the day of that acquisition, thus would further reduce our potential liability.
Thank you, Court. And I just want to mention I am Jeff Fraser, 58 Ridgewood Road, and I've been in Concord for my entire life. So thanks for everybody's help, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for the question, Jeff. I just want to add that the town has a significant lien on the property itself, the back taxes lien, which is going to be part of this whole equation as well. It's not an insignificant obligation to the town. It could be part of some acquisition strategy. Any other questions on Zoom? I don't see any hands raised in the room.
Jerry Driscoll, I'm on Hayward Mill Road as well. You mentioned something about, which brought to mind, when I signed my deed, I had to sign a release to Allied Chemical and American Cyanamid and all those other people who were involved in what had been the powder mill and the entire usage of that area. I'm concerned that we're talking just about one element of that area because of nuclear metals. If you look back further in history, there were other uses for that area, which may have created different types of contamination that are outside the circle of what is the 2229 geometry. And I'm wondering what is being done to evaluate that, to see how that might impact the water table or other types of pollution that could come out. Maybe somebody with a bulldozer clearing a site could find a drum of toluene that was used to make DNT or something like that was dumped. I'm not sure about how much is being done in the periphery that is between our subdivision and what was the nuclear metal site, or to the left over by where the Thoreau and swim and tennis club. Because that area is just, as you probably know, lined with bunkers and things that used to be there where they stored the powder, the black powder, going back over 100 years. Turn of the 20th century, there was a lot of chemical reactions that were used to make explosives, thanks to Mr. Nobel. They also could be laying there. Is that being evaluated?
Well, the investigations on the site and out to the perimeter of the site have been multi-chemical and would have detected any input from whether it's from NMI StarMed or from some other entity. So the investigations have covered it as far as the site. You raise an interesting question because that's not the only thing happening in the area. There's a 40B development which is being planned adjacent in Camp Thoreau now. And how that might impact the whole regional area is out of the purview of this committee. But I think in long-range planning, that has to be taken into account. It's not a contamination issue, but there, to your point, there are other things happening, not in the past, but in the future in that area, which could impact the reuse discussions as well. But as far as the investigations, who might have contaminated from what operations, the investigations at NMI StarMed would have detected any and all of that. But they didn't go far off site into Powder Mill Woods, if that's what you're asking. They're on the site and at the perimeter of the site.
That's the surface. There are investigations about what's flowing off the site underground. Yes, and that's anything. Whoever put it there, they're looking for chemicals of concern. There's a long list of official, we've studied them. They're harmful in this way or that way. And the groundwater wells, for example, that are overactive, they would have caught whatever was on the list of chemicals of concern, whoever put them there, if they came from the site that's under investigation.
So in the Superfund process, it boils down to what are the chemicals of concern? Where does that come from? It comes from a much longer list. When a sample went through the laboratory in 2014, it was analyzed for hundreds of different things. Some were found, some weren't found. So all that data is compressed into what are the chemicals of concern. And that's made their way into the remediation plans. We're looking at depleted uranium and PCBs and 1,4-dioxane, the very specific sets of chemicals that are being attended to right now from a much longer list. So, but that longer list from all possible sources was on the long list to start the investigation.
Also, who does the evaluation of what the property is worth? What would you have to pay for this property? Why does the town have to pay for it? And could back taxes non-payable by Whitaker or whomever justify the town's ownership of the property when the EPA is finished with it?
I've only found out it's bad to answer a legal question when I'm not a lawyer, so I would defer to Mina Markarias. But I will say that's kind of a central question. how much do we have to pay, if anything, and what's the land worth? But go ahead.
And I've long found out that I shouldn't answer appraisal questions if I am a lawyer, so there's part of that, but part of the answer depends on the structure of the deal eventually, and what EPA is willing to do with the town. It very well could be that the appraised value, usually for a transaction like this, the appraised value of the land is what the town would end up having to pay. However, as was mentioned, the town has its own back taxes on it. The town is offering a benefit to the US government and if it acquires the land and taking care of the land for the future. There are offsetting liens that the federal government has that would either need to be released or stay in place. So short answer, it's too early to tell if the town would have to pay and how much, but those are the factors that go into it, is how much money has been invested by the federal government to clean up, how much money is owed to the town, and then what's left over from that. If a tax title or eminent domain was taken, there would have to be a payment of damages based on the value. But again, the value includes the cost as reduced by the environmental contamination that's still there.
I think for us to recommend a decision to the select board, I think outside counsel will have to say the town is in a good negotiating position, because from that point on, there is negotiation to be done. But we have to be told there's a good negotiating position that could come up with a favorable ending to the town. But we won't have all those details by Halloween of 2024. We will know that there's a likely advantageous pathway, including the valuation. Okay, I see no hands raised. I see nobody out here. I want to thank you all for attending. Very lively discussion. There's more to come. It's work in progress. We will engage with you once again. And thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.